It's 2 o'clock. I'm Olive Martini. And if you're just tuning in to KSQM, you know that on the second Wednesday of every month, we do the Working on Wellness Radio Forum. And my guest today is Dr. Kip Tulin. And he's here to talk about a real happy meal. How do you get more vegetables in your diet and that kind of thing? And so we're going to be talking about that for the next hour. And I'm so glad that you could join us. Dr. Tulin.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I usually give, a little bio and all that kind of stuff. How about you tell us a little bit about your background and what got you interested in eating in this particular way?
Wow. Well, I am a retired pediatrician, and actually I am an emeritus physician. I am no longer licensed because one of the things I did to improve my health was remove my stress. So when I retired, I really retired. That said, my wife and I have been vegetarian for a long time. And then we upped our game to vegan, and now it's almost like a sport for us to see how we can improve our diet, sometimes in incremental ways, sometimes in major ways.
Well, before we went on the air, we kind of talked about all of the highly processed food that is so available now. And you're saying that there's a troubling trend of cancer showing up in younger populations. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, when I was first in training, and through most of my career actually, to hear about colon cancer, kidney cancer, and several other cancers in young people was unheard of. I mean, it was something for the demographic I happen to be in now. And now it's showing up in increasing numbers. And it seemed to start picking up in the 1990s, and it seems to be progressing from there. From my own research, it strikes me that there were some trends that started in the 60s. One of them was the switch from cane sugar to high fructose sugar. Now, the high fructose sugar in and of itself is not evil. As a matter of fact, there's as much fructose in table sugar as there is in, and I'm using finger quotes, folks, high fructose corn syrup. But what high fructose corn syrup did was make the price of sweeteners cheaper. So way back when, rather than reduce the price of your soda pop, guess what? Supersize. Then they said, oh gosh, the public likes this, so we put sugar in bread, sugar in sugar, and that was one thing that happened. And the next thing that happened is that there's a whole bunch of stuff in what they call ultra-processed food that's not food. It's the preservatives and things that even with my amazing medical training, I can't pronounce. So I suspect that all this started somewhere in the 60s and has just ramped up. And part of my talk today is to pay attention to what you're putting in your mouth, because yes, we're all going to die from something someday. That's just a fact of life. But if you want to maximize your healthy life, start reading labels. And if I may, I happened to be walking down the aisle in a grocery store, and I took some photographs of the product, the ingredients in two types of cereal. Now, I'm not going to mention the names of the cereals, but I'll let you guess which one I think is most healthy. Okay, here's the first one. And remember that when they list the ingredients, they list them in order of which one is the highest percentage in the mix. So here's one: rice, sugar, canola and or soybean oil, salt, and then it contains 1% or less of natural and artificial flavor, red 40, yellow 6, yellow 5, blue 1, turmeric oleoresin, BHT, and BHA to preserve freshness. Now, here's the other cereal. Ingredients: whole grain wheat, rice, almonds, date powder, whole grain oats, sunflower oil, dried blueberries, coconut oil, sea salt, natural flavor, and vitamin E added to preserve freshness. So, okay, all you out there, I know we're out there further than just Sequim. There are probably people around the world who may be listening to this. All of you raise your hand if you think the first one I read is the healthy one. Oh, very few hands went up. How about the second one? Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh. You guys are brilliant. Okay.
We talked a little bit. I'm going to get off topic for just a second.
Sure, please.
We talked a little bit before you came on the air about something that you have found, and you made bread. It has 3 ingredients. Tell us about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, that gets back to my wife and I having fun looking for more healthy things to do and having fun while doing it. Running back a little further, I used to make the New York Times no-knead bread recipe, sourdough bread. It was delicious, and it was nutritious, but it was still a lot of bread. So I said, how can I do somewhat better with this? So I found a recipe for buckwheat groats. Now, you're going to have to look up buckwheat groats, and if you look on Breadtopia, they have a recipe for this, and it uses 3 ingredients: buckwheat groats, water, and salt. And you put them together, you blenderize them, then you let them ferment for 24 hours, then bake them. And it gives you a dense, very flavorful bread that's really good for you. I have a family member who lives on the East Coast who tried the recipe, and she has diabetes, and she said that testing her sugar after eating the bread, it didn't rise. The bread rose. Yeah, but her sugar did not.
So give us a sample of some of the changes that you made personally in your diet and how that made a difference for you.
Well, one of the things we did was we looked at our standard breakfast. A thing that got to me very quickly when I first traveled on my student Eurail pass is that Americans eat some weird stuff for breakfast. I mean, pancake sausage. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. But my wife Mary and I decided let's see what we can do here. So starting out, get up in the morning while we're brewing our coffee and tea, and we'll get to coffee in a minute.
Yes.
Because I'm not going to buzzkill that one. I like coffee. While we're brewing our coffee and tea, I first start with a stalk of celery. Now, that was on the advice of an Ayurvedic medical practitioner who told me that celery, if you eat it first, will keep your blood sugar from rising as quickly. Because I do have a condition they refer to as prediabetes. So first we eat a stalk of celery.
Just one?
Just one.
Okay.
Just one. But
I'm
that's the
taking
first
notes
thing.
here.
That's the first thing that goes in my mouth. Now, whether this is true or not, I don't know, but I like celery, so what the heck? And then we have these little Belvita breakfast crackers, and each of us gets a date or 2, a fresh date.
Oh, one date.
One date. It's just tasty.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll look at our mail and do email and all that stuff. And I'll take an apple, and it's wonderful if you like apples. Get one of those slicers that makes 8 pieces out of one. So I'll slice the apple, we'll divvy that up, and we'll split a banana. Then after we're done with that, then we decide what do we want for breakfast. But by that time, you're not famished. So a lot of times it will be something like, say, cooked oatmeal cereal, or the cereal that I think is the good cereal that I read the ingredients of, something like that. And that pretty much makes our breakfast. Don't need much. And then our big meal is usually closer to 2. Mm-hmm. And lots of greens. Oh my gosh, we live in Sequim. Sequim is one of the great vegetable baskets of the world. And there's so much for us here. And Mary came up with a great idea. We like hummus too. Hummus is, that's mother's milk. But instead of using chips, we use a fresh cucumber and slice it up and use the fresh cucumber to fork the hummus into our mouths. So there you have it. Lots of salad. You can mix anything up in a salad. And then, in the evening, we will have a guilty pleasure, like a small scoop of, we get vegan ice cream, small scoop of vegan ice cream, and go, hey, I'm alive. If you, back in my younger days, they had a Schlitz beer ad that said you only go around once in life. That may or may not be true, but here we are, and you got to have a little fun. But it's also not a whole bowl full, it's a little glass full.
Okay, and so let's talk a little bit about coffee.
Oh, coffee, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. For years, people have tried to make coffee into something evil. Wahaha. They have failed miserably. It turns out that in just about everything I've read on my medical feeds, up to about 3 cups of coffee, whether it's caffeinated or decaffeinated, is actually good for you. Lower rates of diabetes, colon cancer. You go down the list because there are some products in the coffee that probably feed your microbiome, which we should get to in a moment, that are good for you. As you start to go higher, though, and drink more and more, it's something we call the U-shaped or J-shaped curve of medicine, where a little's good, but a lot is not necessarily better. So there's an old saying that says everything in moderation, including moderation. Sometimes go nuts. One thing, though, I have read recently is that as we age, 2 things we should really watch for. One is overt sugar consumption. Lots of sugar is not good for us. And watch out for the alcohol. Alcohol does not do wonders for an aging brain. So there are some things, we have in our minds our ideal former selves, our precious former selves, and you go, can't do that anymore, folks. And it's probably better if you start earlier taking care of yourself.
Dr. Tulin, tell us a little bit about the people wonder, am I getting enough protein if I'm eating a lot of vegetables and not a lot of meat? Can you address that a little bit?
Oh, yeah. Protein is one of those buzzwords in America especially, where you think you can only get it from a complete source like chicken, fish, beef, yeah. And it turns out that the average American probably gets about 40 to 50% more protein than they really need because of this emphasis on it. It is true that there are foods that are what they call complete proteins. But it's also true that if you eat the cornucopia of vegetables, if one is lacking one of the amino acids you need, another one will surely have it. And so by eating a big mix of it, you get all the amino acids you need for a healthy lifestyle, and probably they're more absorbable and better for you. The example I give is that you look, if you've ever seen up close a bull, they eat grass. They're not eating each other. So you can get strength from things other than meat.
So give us an example of some of the vegetables that are really high in protein.
Well, interestingly enough, I talked about my buckwheat groat bread. That's pretty darn high in it. It's so funny. It's a good question. I don't have a good answer for you because I don't think about it that much.
Do you just eat a variety of all kinds of vegetables that are in season?
Oh, yeah.
And talk to us a little bit about starchy vegetables. How does that come into the diet?
Starchy vegetables are okay, and there are a few hints I can give people on those. The starchy vegetable in American culture is the potato, the white potato. Well, it turns out that something equally delicious is the sweet potato. And it has less sugar in it. It's got more vitamins in it. And the interesting confusion that goes on with people stateside here is that they think that the sweet potatoes that are garnet colored are yams, and they are not. If you go online and you look up a yam, it does not look like anything you're going to get at one of our local stores. So the white sweet potato or the red sweet potato, they're both delicious, and that's one of the changes Mary and I made. We switched from regular potatoes to those just because of the nutrients.
Well, can you talk a little bit about the microbiome and how it's been in the news a lot?
The microbiome has been one of the hottest trends lately. And I like to refer to our microbiome as our 100 trillion best friends. The gut, our gut flora, the bacteria that live down in our guts, is amazingly complex. And that is my intro to say, truly at this point, no one really knows what's going on with the microbiome. We just know that if you have a good microbiome, which tends to go statistically more with eating more vegetables, your gut bacteria make beneficial products that our bodies absorb, less inflammatory. If you're predominantly a heavy meat eater, your microbiome is usually quite different, and it makes things that are pro-inflammatory instead of anti-inflammatory. So when we're feeding our 100 trillion best friends, you have to say, what are you feeding down there? That said, there's an entire industry now, nutraceutical industry, based on prebiotics and probiotics. And it's a good idea, but the details are really lacking. No one is really sure if there is an ideal probiotic that one should take for whatever the condition you have. And they're not even sure what the probiotics do, which bacteria. I mean, the list of the bacteria in our guts is immense. They did a study, I love certain medical studies, where they used a colonoscope, and every centimeter they inserted it, they sampled the bacteria, and they went pretty much all the way through the colon as far as they could get. The colonies of bacteria changed every centimeter. So it's not like you have, this many bacteria in one spot and that's your microbiome. It changes. It changes when you take antibiotics. It changes when you feed it different things. And it is so amazingly complex that at this point, you can use a broad brush to say, eat this, eat that, and it'll help your microbiome. But as far as promising health and stuff, I'm not sure I buy it yet. I don't think we've gotten that far.
What are fermented foods? Are those pre or pro?
They're a little bit of both.
Okay.
The fermented foods have live bacteria in them, and they have the products of fermentation which feed good bacteria. I have to give a shout out, if I may, to the Brits pickle people who are over on Whidbey Island, because we love their pickles, and they are fermented in barrels. And we always, when we're done with the pickles, we have pickle juice left over that's real fermented stuff. So Mary contacted them and they said, well, you can use it in your salad dressings. And this is something we just started doing. We have a little shot glass of pickle juice every night. And it actually is surprisingly good. Just rinse your teeth afterwards, because, so there's good stuff in fermented foods. Yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi. Remember I told you about, we were talking offline about injera, which is the traditional bread of Ethiopia. That's actually a fermented product. And it's delicious. So, the more the merrier.
Well, if you could pick the biggest thing to avoid in your diet, what would that be?
Give me two.
Okay.
Things. Okay, two things. It's really the two biggest things. Well, maybe I'll make it three. Number one, though, ultra-processed foods. Read your labels. If it looks like it's got too many things that you can't understand or name, don't buy it. Go for simple ingredients. And then two, look at the total amount of sugar you're eating. And three, alcohol. You can have some, even though they've just shown that there was an old saw in the medical news for many, many years that a little tipple once a day is good for you. They're finding out that's not true. It's not deadly, but it's also not good for you. So
right.
I have my collections of things.
Yeah, and alcohol turns to sugar in your system.
It does. Yep. It does, and they think they who. You hear my air quotes again. They who know everything, they think it also affects your microbiome.
Okay.
Yeah. So
okay.
There's that M word again.
So, and I've also heard that if you're coming off of antibiotics, that's probably destroyed an awful lot of the good bacteria in your system. Is that correct?
It does destroy a lot of things. The good news is, and these are rat studies, where they actually tried to completely eliminate the microbiome in the rat gut. And there were just enough germs that hide in crevices and nooks and crannies down there that they completely repopulated their guts. So you can mess with it. And there are certain conditions where people start growing. There's a particular thing called Clostridium difficile, which is a nasty, nasty germ. But most of the time we get away with it because the gut is resilient.
One of our listeners called in, and she said she missed the recipe that Dr. Tulin talked about for buckwheat groats. And you can tell us where you found those here in the area, and tell us a little bit about how you make that bread and where the recipe is.
Oh, yeah, buckwheat. I got interested in that to cut down my total sugar intake, even from virtuous things like whole grain breads that I've learned to bake. And I'll skip over to one thing quickly. The best bread making recipes I find are on breadtopia.com. Breadtopia.com. And all you have to do is go there and find the bread you want to make. They will tell you how to do it. But I got interested in something a little different, like buckwheat. And so I looked up a recipe for this, and it uses buckwheat groats. Now, buckwheat is actually more closely related to the rhubarb family, as I remember, than it is to wheat or rice or anything like that. It has much less starch. So it makes a fairly dense and flavorful bread that really tastes good if you toast it up just a bit and put a smear of, well, we use Miyoko butter, but whatever you like to put on it.
Avocado toast.
Oh, yes.
Hey.
Thank you. Thank you. And, so you go, where do you go to get buckwheat groats? And we went to the Sunnyside Market in Port Angeles. And
Country
Air, I'm sorry.
Country Air.
That's right, Country Air. Thank you. I always get, and I also still
Sometimes
get
these-
Port Angeles and
Yeah.
Port Townsend mixed up.
Sometimes these things are hard to find, but you found it here in the area.
Indeed, and they had it in their. They have bins of it, and it uses three things. It uses buckwheat groats, water, and salt, and then you mix it up. You let it sit for a while, then you blend it. Then you let it sit for 24 hours. Then you bake it. And you get this fermented bread that is absolutely delicious. Up north, on Vancouver Island, the town of Tofino, there is a wonderful restaurant called Bravocado. And Mary and I went in there, and Chef Dave has made some of the greatest vegan recipes. We bought his recipe book. I actually have a signed copy. Someday on Antiques Roadshow, it might be worth something. But he has something he calls a Bravo burger that we now make ourselves. And it's a black bean burger. And it is, we make the entire recipe, so it's 12 burgers at a time, and we freeze them. And so between that, a good healthy bun, some of those pickles I talked about,
Right.
lettuce, and we get vegan cheese. You can have your cheeseburger, and in our little air fryer that I have, instead of making regular French fries from white potatoes, I make sweet potato fries. Very easy. You just take them, slice them up, put them in a big plastic container, toss them with some oil, pepper, whatever seasonings you want. I like paprika on it. And then throw it in there until they're crispy and have at it.
Well, speaking of oil, what kind of oils do you suggest?
My favorite oil, my go-to, is avocado oil. Mm-hmm. And mainly because one of the things I do like is popcorn. And I need something with a very high smoke point. And
Right.
that's what avocado oil has. I use olive oil more for flavoring. And when you look around the world, the oils that people use were the oils they had. So, of course, in Italy, you're going to have olive oil. but you're not going to have the same source of oil in, say, another country. But it's the high smoke point. The other thing that has a high smoke point is coconut oil. And I use that in my, when I'm baking my other guilty pleasure, my vegan chocolate chip cookies. I use coconut oil in it to bind things together.
Well, we've been talking about factors, for what to eat. What are some of the other non-dietary factors that people should be aware of?
Well, right along with eating right, you have to get out and move. You really do. Movement is life. That's what we're designed for. And if you, like Mary and I have, another thing we've added to our life is we're going on more walks together. You do not have to scale the highest peaks to get exercise. Just a pleasant walk. And if you are able to walk around an area that has greenery, it's good for the soul, and it may be good for everything connected to that soul, because there's something about turning off your devices, going for a walk through the trees, and just letting your senses run wild.
What do you think about vitamins and other supplements?
I do admit I have a point of view on this where I think they're way overrated, because if you eat a really, really well-balanced diet, you don't need most of the vitamins. Now, there are medical cases like for example, with B12, with some people who can't absorb it, where, that's a physician-decided thing. But overall, if you eat the cornucopia of foods, you're going to get everything you need in abundance. Supplements are kind of a Wild West show. I do take supplements, as a matter of fact. I have a slightly dry eye, so I take, It's omega-7s. And I take a few other things, but for the most part, I'm not a big supplement fan. I say, get it from what you eat, and be careful about self-prescribing. Something like turmeric, which through the ages has been used for inflammation. It is true. But people, if they're self-prescribing, take it way out beyond limits, and then it can be toxic to your liver. I mean, you have to take a ton of it. This is true. But be careful what you're doing and who you're getting your advice from.
We're back. What do you suggest?
Oh gosh, I love living in the Pacific Northwest. That weather report is perfect, because one of my other hobbies is I built, for a retirement present, I built myself a 16-foot skin-on-frame rowboat, and I row out in Dungeness Bay. So it's my playground.
It's perfect weather.
Oh, what a wonderful place.
Perfect weather for that.
I interrupted you.
To get out and walk in the forest is a wonderful thing.
Oh, yes.
And we have plenty of forest here in the Pacific Northwest.
Yes, we do, and wonderful trails. They're well maintained, and they're everything from flatland to tremendously challenging. And I've been on some of those where but at the end of it, I said, what was I thinking? There's some realities of getting older.
So we talked a little bit about what you do first thing in the morning. Mm-hmm. As a reminder, you get up and you have a stalk of celery, which I thought was very interesting. And you said that it helps with your prediabetes. Mm-hmm. And do that first. You say then you have a date, some apple, half a banana, and then you have oatmeal. You talked about drinking pickle juice.
Yeah, a little shot glass.
One of the things that I think is very refreshing is apple cider vinegar with soda water. So tell us a little bit about that combination. What's that doing for you?
Well, that actually, when you mentioned it, I was smiling because a few years ago I read an article that was a common drink way back in colonial days. They called it a shrub, and they would mix vinegar with whatever the juice they had of the day was, and that was their beverage. And what a wonderful, tasty way to get your prebiotics, probiotics, whatever we want to call them.
So what do you do as, alcohol is we're learning more and more that alcohol's not that good for you. Of course, junk food is not good for you. What do you do at the end of the day? How do you prepare for sleep, to get a good night's sleep?
By having I prepare for a good night's sleep by having a really busy day if I can. But there are some things. I mean, back in the day, when I used to drive a diesel truck before I became a doctor, I remember at the end of the day, a cold beer was what I wanted. Well, there's something about a habit that sticks with you. But now they make a whole bunch of delicious alcohol-free beers. And in this one, the young people are way ahead of us. They will go to bars. They have whole bars, and this is around the world, including right in the center of Paris, which are alcohol-free bars. And so they have mocktails, and they can have all of the wonderful flavors and the conversation and the ambiance, and yet not the alcohol buzz. So there's a lot of stuff you can do, but yeah, then there comes a time of winding down. It is suggested by sleep experts that you use your bedroom for sleep. Now, I break that rule because I crawl in bed and I read a book, and they say you should actually read somewhere else and then come in and go to sleep, but okay, I'm guilty. Otherwise, I'd be perfect and you couldn't stand me.
So, what do you suggest for people that are having trouble getting to sleep? I mean, dairy, of course, is not something that you necessarily have in your diet. What would you suggest to someone who was having difficulty getting to sleep and eating earlier in the day, or maybe not eating a specific food that might keep them up?
Wow, that is a very good question. Generally, most of the sleep things I've read have to do with developing habits that you practice over a long period of time. There's nothing you can just say, I'm going to do this and I will get a good night's sleep. One of the things is not watching TV right before you go to bed. Don't doom scroll through your device right before going to bed. It's just not the right thing to do. So maybe just quiet down, have a little snack, something that says comfort to you. And if you have someone to talk to, maybe a little quiet talk.
Well, I brought up dairy, and I know that that's not something that you have in your diet, but what kind of dairy alternatives would you suggest to our listeners?
Well, if you don't have any allergies to it, there's soy milk, there's oat milk, there's pea protein milk. Most of the large stores carry some kind of alternative.
Like almond milk.
Almond milk, all the nut milks, yeah. And so they don't taste like milk, but
it's close enough on your cereal and you won't know the difference.
Exactly. and the ice cream that I eat, which is vegan.
Now, where do you find that? Or do you make it?
No.
Okay.
No. I wouldn't trust myself. That's too precious an item to trust to my cooking. No. They have it in the supermarkets,
Yeah?
and usually vegan ice creams are stocked next to the regular ice creams.
Well, before I let you go, this has been very informative. Tell us some of the restaurants here in the area where people can go and find vegetarian fare cuisine.
Wow. You mean if they don't want to go all the way up to Tofino?
That's right.
Okay, then. Well, actually, one of Mary's and my favorites is in Port Angeles. It's called the New Day Cafe, and they have a fabulous menu where they have a full regular menu and a full vegan menu. And I have to say, I'm a pretty good vegetarian cook by now, but what their chef makes is absolutely delicious. Another thing to do is that Mary and I have done is hop on the ferry, go across to Victoria, because up in Canada they have a wonderful vegan scene. And most places have vegetarian or vegan options, if you ask. As time has gone on, Mary and I eat less out, and I'm having more fun cooking at home.
Sure. Well, we don't mean to promote anything over anything else, but I know that when you're out and you're about and you're trying to stay vegetarian and vegan, sometimes it can be difficult.
There is an app for on your cell phone or device called what is it called? It's Happy Cow. Happy Cow, and any town you're in, they will tell you about the restaurant, the foods that are available.
That's
Vegan,
very good.
vegetarian, a lot of places serve both, and they give the ratings and all that stuff. So Happy Cow is a wonderful resource, especially when you're traveling.
Well, Dr. Tulin, I want to thank you so much for coming in. It's always fun to talk with you, and we're trying to get more vegetables into our diet, and you've given us so many good ideas. This is the Working on Wellness Radio Forum that we do the second Wednesday of every month at 2 o'clock, and this is brought to you by the Dungeness Valley Health and Wellness Clinic. They are one of 32 free clinics in the state of Washington, and the clinic is open here in Sequim on Monday and Thursday evenings. The doors open at 4:30 p.m. No appointments are necessary, and the Sequim Free Clinic serves anyone that doesn't have health insurance or is underfunded by their insurance policy. They're located at 777 North 5th Avenue. Thank you again.
Pleasure.